defying all hatred, be the love beyond toleration, be the love before pride and exaltation, be the love, be the love. Hey, be the hope for the children's salvation, be the peace for the nation's reconciliation, be the life that says yes to all creation, be the love, be the love. Destruction's always easier than creation, but all things created are sacred. Destruction's always easier than creation, but all things created are sacred. So be the healing for the orphan born with AIDS, be the strength the neighbor's burden raise, be the star that guides us through this haze, be the love, be the love, be the love, be the love. Oh. Be the love.
People of Solomon's Porch, today we meet.
In this place, but not only in this place.
We tell the story of the light of God.
Light that shines on all people.
We tell the story of promises made to those who are too old and too young.
Too broken and too far outside.
We tell the story of deliverance.
Not from this life, but for this life.
And tell of the love of God.
A love from which nothing can separate us.
Not life nor death.
Nor anyone nor anything in all creation.
We meet with the Spirit of God.
As the salt of the earth and light of the world.
We share these stories with one another.
Seeking to be a benefit and blessing to all the world. Amen.
You that love lovers, this is your home. Welcome. You that love lovers, this is your home. Welcome. In the midst of making form, love made this form and built so form with love for the door. So the vestibule
Okay, I'd add my little welcome to that. If I mentioned, my name's Doug, and we're glad you're here tonight. Our community meets Sunday mornings now and Sunday nights at 5, and a chance to welcome each other. And for some of us, some of you, maybe the first chance you have to welcome little Calvin into this world, into our community. We're glad he's alive. We're glad he's part of this community. And we have this practice where we welcome a child in to our community. We make a couple of vows to each other and to Calvin. We make this vow supporting Calvin, loving him, coming around him, helping him grow in the way of Jesus in the world. And also a commitment we make to being led by Calvin. That even the little ones, the littlest ones, the most vulnerable ones, have something to contribute to all of us, and he will lead us in his own way through his life. So, you're going to get to meet him here. So if you click that, there's a picture. There they are in all their glory. Alright, so this is, some of you already know the Janelle and Ben part of the Krupnik family, and then this is Calvin Jude Krupnik. And he's really little. He's 2 weeks old, 3 weeks old?
2.5, yeah.
Yeah, two and a half weeks old. So, and you have family in town, so we're doing this today, right? They're sort of spread around. Okay, we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to ask the family to stand up here in just a moment, and we're also going to ask the people at Solomon's Porch to stand up. We're going to ask the little ones to come up around Calvin, because his family, his friends in this community of faith all are going to be shaped by Calvin. They're going to shape him in the way that God moves in his life. So, all right, we'll start with the family first. So, family members, why don't you stand up and let us meet all of you. They're responsible for all that food that's out there. So if you've already enjoyed that, thank you all of you for it. All right, so Calvin's family, will you allow us to join you as you welcome Calvin into the world and to help him follow God in the way of Jesus? If so, say we do. Friends of Calvin, the little ones in our community, would you come up and join us right here and come around him? You may not have met him yet. He might seem a little special because he's just a little baby. Babies of all ages and little ones that want to come around. Come in nice and close if you want to see his sweet little face. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question and you can say we will, sort of. All right? Little friends of Calvin, will you love him? Will you be his friend? Will you help him follow God? If so, say we will. We will. Excellent, Charlotte. All right, the rest of the Solomon's Porch community, would you all stand together? People of the Solomon's Porch community, will you welcome Calvin into the world? Will you love him? Will you bless him? And will you be led by him in the ways that he leads us to follow God in the way of Jesus? If so, say we do. We do. And if you'd stay standing, we have this ancient practice that we engage in here where we take oil. This is frankincense oil made by Sarah, and we're going to ask for blessings on Calvin's life. The oil has represented a blessing of God, for it doesn't dissipate, it soaks in. It doesn't evaporate, it stays wet. So people have, for a long time, used oils as an essential blessing and an essential healing. So for Calvin, we're going to pray that he would have God's wisdom in his head, that his eyes would see God's glory, that his mouth would tell God's story, that his heart would be Jesus' home, that his hands would do the work of God, and that his feet will follow wherever he's led. And we pray and bless you, Calvin, as a community of faith. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen. He's a little sweet. You might want to take a minute. We're going to communion in a bit, but you might want to come and see him a little bit. He's really sweet. So say hi to each other for a second and have a seat and we'll back in there.
She cradles her baby so close, helpless to come, hears cries. Simple food would be his medicine, the healing of wholesome nourishment. Oh, for the hope of a happy, healthy child, with radiant, rosy cheeks, a glad and glowing smile, learning there's no end to his possibilities. Even rising up out of poverty. Oh, if you feed the body, you can free the soul. Give to one a future. Give us all some hope. Every child should know that he is never alone. Have a chance to survive, thrive and grow. For vibrant living, the blessed beginning and a healthy start. Sharp creative minds, strong courageous hearts, and free to become anyone she dreams. An artist, a teacher, a doctor with a remedy. Oh, if you feed the body, you can free the soul. Give to one a future. Give us all a hope. Wherever she is born upon this great big globe, let's make our world her safe and happy home. For the whole wide world around, we lift our voices loud, living together here as one. There's so much that can be done. We can be the difference. The love, the nourishment, oh, the giver of all good things, chooses you and chooses me. Oh, if you feed the body, you can free the soul. Give to one a future. Give us all the hope. Every child should know that she is never alone. Have the chance to survive, thrive and grow. Have the chance to survive, thrive and grow.
As you know, it's Memorial Day weekend, which means a couple of things around this community. One, it means we find out who has cabins, because they're not here, so keep an eye on those people and hit them up over the course of the summer. It's also a time where we, like everyone else, are called to reflect on the sacrifice of the people in our military. But as people of humanity, we also join together in this conflicted moment of wanting war to stop. that we'd like there to be a day when there don't have to be Memorial Days any longer, when there's a day where peace on earth, when the swords are pounded into plowshares, when the valleys and the mountains are leveled, when things are made the way they're supposed to be. And so we live in a world where we long for honoring and respecting those who have been the victims and the afflicted of war. But we also desire for there to be something greater. And in some ways, having communion is constantly that story. You might know the story of communion already. You know that it was invoked by Jesus when he was telling the story of the nation of Israel leaving Egypt, and that enslaved people running from another nation that was pursuing them in war. And then Jesus takes the elements and connects them to his body the night before he is going to become himself the victim of the oppressive systems of religion and of empire. And so we take in remembrance of a victim, and we take in the longing that we would all be freed from the effects of such things, both in the long term and in the life that we live now. And so we try to live out that new life, that new humanity, that call of God to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world in all of our circumstances. So around this community, we have communion house party style. There is wine over at that spot behind the red couch in the center. There's juice spread around to all the other places. There's gluten-infused breads all over, except over on this table where there's gluten-free crackers that are made with almonds. So if you have a gluten and nut allergy, then there's some carrot sticks out in the other room. There's food to be had by all of us. And there's plenty for you to share, we hope. So take as much as you like, because we want to tell the story of connection to both the oppressed and the oppressor, and to share this symbolic activity that there's more than enough for the new humanity of God in this world. So we invite you to, you'll get up, it's house party style, everyone's invited to share, everyone's invited to take, and you're invited not to partake. So if this isn't your thing and you don't want to be part of that story, you're either welcome to just have bread and juice and wine and not take our meaning, or you're welcome to pass altogether and know that there's no judgment placed on you for any of that. We do have this reading that we do where we try to tell the biggest story that we can, the largest story of its possibility. There's 2 long run-on sentences in here. I would invite 2 of you to be the readers, one to be the reader of the first sentence, which stops after the words throughout all ages, and then the second reader to pick up at that point. So would somebody like to be our reader? Charlotte, fire away, dear.
Okay, we take communion by serving and eating bread and wine together. In communion with followers of Jesus around the world and throughout all ages, we enter this mystery. Know that one? The singing and having the faith of Jesus as the Messiah whose life, the death, burial, resurrection, ascension, and sending show the love of God in Christ, free us from sin, and initiate the kingdom of God in our lives throughout all ways, through the benefit and blessing of all the world.
Couldn't have been said better. So with a fresh voice, stand up, serve each other, sort of have at it with each other, and then we'll circle up here in a minute.
Oh, you know I need a retreat from the frenzy and private life. I was gonna do that. I need a sun in the shade, and the warm breeze on my face, and the
we'll be back to see us a little later.
You better walk the memory. He walked them all. You're haunted by an orphan's pedigree, a whispered call. You felt it like we feel a melody. Back and forth, believing anything. Up and down again on Mary Street. Since the fall, a dirty gown and a pair of feet was all she saw. Reaching out with what she left in her, blacking out just as it came to her. Soothe my soul. Oh, soothe
So, community dinner. Does anyone want to host it this Wednesday? Any takers? You can sit here and think about it, and if you decide later than tonight, you can let us know what's happening this week.
Here, I can take this, Julie. I'm Victoria, and I'm teaching a poetry writing course, and you're all invited, even you Cruffners. Put it away, Cruffner. So I'm teaching a poetry writing class, and it's going to meet on Thursday evenings in the conference room on the second floor in this building in the middle of the hallway. It'll be $120 for 4 weeks, and everyone is welcome. It's going to be a writing intensive class, and if you want to critique things, we can critique. We'll shape it according to what the people want. We already have some people registered, but we'd love to have you as well. So you can email me or give me a phone call, or else just talk to me here. And I would really, really love to have you in class. It'd be lovely. Thanks.
Is there anyone here that can chat about this? Looks like the next brew day is June 8th at Ian Campbell's house. You can put the address there and talk to Steve if you are interested in doing that. And any last announcements?
Yeah, I have one. Tomorrow I'm going to be outside kind of finishing up or continuing to work on what we started last week with the playground. So if anyone would like to join me, maybe just grab me after the service. Probably roll in around 10 or 10:30.
Anyone else? Okay. There are 2 giving boxes. One is up here and one is here, and so you can put your money in there if you're a covenant participant who likes to give. And then also, if you want to be added to the weekly email, it has lots of information for you. That is a very valuable email you can sign up for and stick it in the giving boxes. And then there's our information if you want to check out more about us. And then we are going to have time now where we just hang out and chat. And there's also more announcements that are scrolling up on the screen, so you can take a look at those. And then also, if you're not sure what to do with yourself during this time, if you want to help out by putting the communion stuff back in the kitchen, that is very helpful as well.
that's coming in two varieties. What we'll do here in this room, where we read books of the Bible out loud, during this time of year. And also downstairs, there's a time of guided meditation, reflection, and prayer. So if you're more interested in that, Shelley is leading that time. It'll last the same amount of time as this sermon moment. So if you want to go down there,
it's actually going to be upstairs in the meeting room because the little kids are dancing in the yoga studio.
oh, you better. So upstairs on the second floor, Shelley will do the guided reflection, meditation, prayer. If you're up for that, that's your cup of tea, feel free to go do that. If during the conversation we're having here, that you just can't get that invitation out of your mind, feel free at any point to get up and go out there. No harm, no foul. I'm just going to be offended by that one minute. Or go anywhere out there, actually. Go anywhere you like. While that's going on. We've been reading the book of Mark. Starting in 2 weeks, we're going to start our soapbox sermons. Soapbox sermons are times where people in this community take 10 minutes to have a sermon on anything they want. So that will start in a couple of weeks. This week and next week we'll be finishing our reading the book of Mark. We've been doing this since January. We are wrapping it up now. I have suggested that one of the ways to think about the book of Mark were these are like ancient stories that for thousands of years were passed along, first in oral tradition and then in rudimentary written communities, and then in much more sophisticated reading and writing communities. But these really sound like, or you could maybe think about them, what we're going to read tonight, reading like what we would say modern day vernacular as a television show, like a serial television program, where each of the readings we do are like one of the episodes during the season. So the whole book of Mark might be this season, and then there's an episode within that for the chapter. And then within the chapter, there's these different scenes. So tonight's reading is going to have 5 scenes to it. We're picking up the reading at a very interesting time in the whole narrative. It's going to come to an end very fast, and we're at the point with the arrest of Jesus and leading right through the crucifixion. So all of that will happen just in the readings tonight. And as we often do, you read off the screen if you'd like to be the voice, and then we'll narrate our way through. So here we go. This is the end of the 14th and the 15th chapters of the book of Mark.
They led Jesus away to the high priest, and all the chief priests, elders, and legal experts gathered. Peter followed them from a distance, right into the high priest's courtyard. He was sitting with the guards, warming himself by the fire. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for testimony against Jesus in order to put him to death, but they couldn't find any.
This little opening scene of tonight's episode is familiar to me in a couple of ways. It was early on in my Christianity when I got into this that I was hanging around people who were trying to amuse me of these ideas of Christianity. And one of the arguments against the validity of New Testament writing, especially Gospels, is that it doesn't always, by the best guesses of some people's historic evidence, make sense to how they think things would have gone. You might know that the story as we pick it up tonight is happening during the Passover celebration. Like just half a chapter earlier, right, last week's episode, Jesus is calling for the disciples to put together the Passover meal. They have the Passover meal. They leave the Passover meal that very night, and they go to the garden, and the garden is where the arrest happens, and from there they lead Jesus away. So this is all at the time of Passover. And there are people who would say, look, during Passover, the Jewish system is not having a business meeting. They're not going to have the chief priests and the elders and the legal experts and the whole Sanhedrin getting together the night of Passover. It's Passover, and it's the beginning of the Sabbath celebration. They're not going to do that. So there are people who, when they read this, they say, yeah, okay, that doesn't comport with what we think probably happened in any occasion. And then other people chimed into my life and chime up when that argument is made, and they would say, well, maybe in such an extreme special circumstance, such a thing would happen, and these kinds of things. And it's one of those places where we become reminded that there is a narrative that the gospel writers are wanting to tell. One of the questions worth asking ourselves whenever you're reading a gospel piece is, what did the gospel community, the early Christians in the first 30, 50, 70, 100, 150 years, what did they think mattered for the story that they wanted to tell? How did they select the pieces that were going to be carried on in the oral tradition and then into the written traditions? How did they decide, and on what basis were they picking these things? So maybe there's a way in which you're telling a narrative that is really true without having to comport to all of the ways that it may have happened. So Shelley and I are old people, so at night we watch reruns of The West Wing. It's like we try to get home early by 9 so we squeeze in 2 episodes, and then I have a little Raisin Bran and try to stay regular, and we sit there like old people watching The West Wing eating Raisin Bran, right? And we like that show. It is pathetic. And there's a lot of things that happen in The West Wing that help somebody learn about politics. You can learn about how the government functions. You can learn about these insider arguments. You can learn about the presidency. And then there's some things about that show that are totally inaccurate. Like the door to Leo's office doesn't connect straight to the Oval Office. That door is a closet. The famous Monica Lewinsky closet, as it were. But anyway, you can't go to another office from there. And if you're going to have a discussion about what we're going to do with Iran, you're not going to primarily have your press secretary and your political operative without having your Secretary of State in there. You're not going to do that, right? So the show is not accurate like that. But it is very accurate in trying to say these are the kinds of stories that the President of the United States deals with, and they keep a common set of characters in place to carry that narrative. There's a sense in which if you're going to tell this story, you're going to tell it with the right characters doing their things in a particular way. So there are some for whom that works. It works for me to read the Gospels like this. There's some, though, that they read this or they hear those arguments and they say right off the bat, like, yeah, that's where I get off the ship. Like, I can't do that. I can't buy it any longer. And then there are some who are like, I never even would have thought about that stuff. The guy in the school hadn't brought all that up. Like, it made it worse, not any better. But anyway, we find ourselves in the midst of a conflict, this opening scene. This conflict between Jesus and the religious structure that wants to put him to death. So at least from there, the narrative goes on like this.
Many brought false testimony against him, but they contradicted each other. Some stood to offer false witness against him, saying, "We heard him saying, I will destroy this temple, constructed by humans, and within 3 days I will build another one, not made by humans." But their testimony didn't agree even on this point.
Then the high priest stood up in the middle of the gathering and examined Jesus. "Aren't you going to respond to the testimony these people have brought against you?" But Jesus was silent and didn't answer. Again, the high priest asked, "Are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One?" Jesus said, "I am, and you will see the human one sitting on the right side of the Almighty and coming in the heavenly clouds."
Now that little line right there, the last paragraph, that has been picked up by Christians many different times of Christian history to have lots of meaning. There's a narrative that has those phrases being the words of Jesus talking about what's referred to often as the second coming. That Jesus here is promising that that's going to happen. He's going to come on these clouds, and imagery out of the book of Revelation, riding on a horse and a sword coming out of his mouth and coming in the clouds with blood red sky, and all those kinds of things. And so some have read that meaning. Others read that not with that at all. Like, no, you're going to see the human one. It is not a conversation about some 2,000 year later activity. That Jesus is borrowing this really important language from the Jewish community to say, the one you are talking about, I'm on the side of God. You might see me as like this criminal, this disruptor, this heretic, this blasphemer, but I'm sitting at the right hand of God, not in a way that and now you're all going to bow at my feet, but you will see that the Son of Man is the one on the side of God. The human one is on the side of God.
Jesus uses the phrase, he says, I am, which harkens way back to Abraham.
Starts to click into Abraham's conversation, Moses' conversation with God about what name should we call you, and God says, there's no name. I don't go by a name. I just am. I am what is. I'm not a separate thing that you name, like you name the animals and the mountains and your child. God is God and not nameable.
So that was a real loaded answer.
Yeah, so when he says, I am, are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed One? That I am, some would hear as putting him in the same family as God. Interestingly, at the 10 o'clock this morning gathering, people were picking up this back and forth, that you have all of these accusations being raised. You have all of these people getting together. You have all of this turmoil stirring up, and Jesus doesn't engage in it at all. It was Rachel who was sitting there with Ben sitting, who said, you know, it's interesting in this, Jesus doesn't get into answering all the accusations that come in these testimonies about he's going to do this, he's going to do that. Instead, he just says, that's who I am. He talks about who he is, not about all the accusations. It's an interesting thought to see it as even a guided way of thinking about how one responds when you are criticized, when you're critiqued, to not gauge in it, but to own yourself, who you are, and how you function. Anybody else with any comments about it? Keep going? Okay.
Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, "Why do we need any more witnesses? You've heard his insult against God. What do you think?" They all condemned him. He deserves to die. Some began to spit on him. Some covered his face and hit him, saying, "Prophecy." Then the guards took him and beat him.
End of scene 1, into scene 2.
Meanwhile, Peter was below in the courtyard. A woman, one of the high priest's servants, approached and saw Peter warming himself by the fire. She stared at him and said, "You are also with the Nazarene, Jesus." But he denied it, saying, "I don't know what you're talking about. I don't understand what you're saying." And he went outside into the outer courtyard. A rooster crowed.
Okay, so if you haven't been following the story so far, the idea of the rooster crowing is this important deal. Jesus made mention episode earlier, but Peter's like, I'm never going to turn my back on you. I'm with you the whole time. I'm going where you're going. He's like, don't think you should, my paraphrase, don't try to make all this, Peter, about that you think you're going to stick with it and this is all about your own faithfulness. In fact, Peter, you're going to be part of all of this, but in your unfaithfulness as much as your faithfulness. In fact, before the rooster crows twice, you're going to turn your back, deny me 3 different times. So here's rooster crows once. And then Ratchet, who was sitting there, noticed at the 10 o'clock, she said, it's like you're reading a play or the television show. And the rooster crows now pulls you, remind you that you're not just in the interpersonal narrative, but you're in this larger scene. So then you're reminded of this deeper narrative that you find yourself in, of this thing that was said before and this thing that's going to happen afterward. So this scene goes on like this, and we can talk about it some more.
The female servant saw him and began a second time to say to those standing around, "This man is one of them." But he denied it again. A short time later, those standing around again said to Peter, "You must be one of them because you are also a Galilean." He cursed and swore, "I don't know this man you're talking about." At that very moment, a rooster crowed a second time. Peter remembered what Jesus told him. Before a rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. And he broke down sobbing.
The early community of followers of Jesus for whom Peter is a really big deal, right? Like there's no history of Christianity that can be told without Peter's character being a really big deal. He's like important. One of the early disciples around Jesus a lot. In Catholic tradition, he becomes the first pope, and all the other popes follow in succession for Peter. And in the earliest writings of the Gospels, it has Peter failing. I wonder what that's about. I wonder why the early Christian community wanted to have not just a hero, but a failure in Peter. Not just the strong one, not just the faithful one, not just the one who after Pentecost is seemingly so full of boldness and confidence, but also the one who on this very night breaks down and is sobbing. So there's something to that, it seems to me. There's some reason why that story gets told. It's really easy for a lot of us to tell the story of our own lives, about our own faithfulness to God, or our faithfulness to our spouses, or our faithfulness to our convictions, or our faithfulness to ourselves, see ourselves failing that and not knowing how to narrate that story. So maybe the early Christian community and the 21st Christian community find themselves in the same place where a failure narrative of the lead apostle is a really good thing.
I think just taking the moment of thinking about this, Jesus tells him this, and his failure hadn't come yet.
Yes.
And thinking about when we position ourselves in relationship to other people and maybe acknowledging that simply our failure hasn't come yet could be a piece of being able to understand kind of grace. Because I think, he's forgiven by this, or he's forgiven for this by the church and by history in general.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I think that's interesting.
There's going to be a line to read if you're here next week where Jesus at the resurrection is wanting Peter to know. Name the line. Be sure Peter knows. It really feels like it completes that thing from last week, and then this week, and next week's reading. It's really interesting. Go ahead, Michael.
Oh, I like the idea of being able to forgive yourself, to being able to look at this story and then read that again. The main apostle failed, and he was forgiven. I can look at my own life, forgive myself from God, or otherwise I might find too much shame or not be able to make that step.
Mark's gospel doesn't tell the story of Judas, the other betrayer. Other gospels pick that up. Mark's doesn't, but it's that very same narrative, isn't it?
I guess I was going to say about the same thing, that we can identify with Peter because of our humanness and our failure, and what it takes to really come to the Lord. It takes a breaking down.
I mean, I don't know everybody in this room well, but all that I do know, we're all failures at a pretty good level, right? So like, I don't think anybody skipped that step in the whole thing. So it's not like anybody's, being called out in front, differently than anybody else. Yeah. So
The big difference that I see between this story in this early gospel and the Judas story, which is in the later gospels, is that Peter is forgiven and he becomes the rock on which the church is built.
Yeah.
There is no forgiveness for Judas.
Yeah, it doesn't. Judas ends up hanging himself in those other gospels, doesn't he? Yeah, maybe there was a compare and contrast between those who forgive themselves and those who hang themselves. Michelle, did you say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, so I teach art, and something that is really tough for our students is trying to grapple with this idea of failure. And so something we talk about a lot is the fact that you actually showed up and tried. I think it's a remarkable thing to see this idea of there being a sort of pride and humility that goes sort of hand in hand. You don't show up with a failure, you're not going to show up with glory.
I was thinking that too, but Peter must have thought he was actually going with Jesus. I mean, he's the only one who followed Jesus.
Yeah.
It sounds like.
Yeah.
So he probably thought he was doing it right.
It was right there.
And then just didn't kind of wait for him, or he didn't realize they were.
And they're not even good lies. It's like, really, you're seriously with them, Like, what else are you doing here? Yeah. Okay, that's scene 2, scene 3. I don't know if we'll make it through all 5 before the little ones come back.
At daybreak, the chief priests with the elders, legal experts, and the whole Sanhedrin formed a plan. They bound Jesus, led him away, and turned him over to Pilate. Pilate questioned him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus replied, "That's what you said." The chief priests were accusing him of many things.
Sorry.
Pilate asked him again, "Aren't you going to answer? What about all these accusations?" But Jesus gave no more answers, so that Pilate marveled. During the festival, Pilate released one prisoner to them, whomever they requested. A man named Barabbas was locked up with the rebels who had committed murder during an uprising. The crowd pushed forward and asked Pilate to release someone, as he regularly did.
It's one of those places now in this scene where the Gospel of Mark starts to pull out a lot of names. Pontius Pilate, Barabbas. You can see a couple more here.
Pilate answered them, Do you want me to release you to the king? Do you want me to release you to the king of the Jews? He knew that the chief priests had handed him over because of jealousy. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd and had him release Barabbas to them instead. Pilate replied, "Then what do you want me to do with the one you call king of the Jews?"
They shouted back, "Crucify him." Pilate said to them, "Why, what wrong has he done?" They shouted even louder, "Crucify him." Pilate wanted to satisfy the crowd, so he released Barabbas to them. He had Jesus whipped, then handed over to be crucified.
Shelley at the 10 o'clock was really just perturbed. It strikes her temperament wrongly. I think that Pontius Pilate here is such a appeaser of the crowd and doesn't do what he seems he ought to do. Her temperament doesn't do well with, like people who just skip out on their responsibility. It's an Enneagram 6 thing and some other things, but she doesn't like that idea that he didn't hold up his part of the deal.
It sounds like maybe Barabbas was a rebel who had been part of an uprising against the Romans.
Yeah.
So he, it would seem, would fit more into the Jewish model of what the Messiah would be
Oh, interesting.
than Jesus.
Like, so here Barabbas, the one who wanted to bring about some kind of an overthrow of the Roman rule. The Romans had overtaken the Jewish community, and they were living in sort of a police state, and he was one of the rebels against that. And he's the one that's let go. Interesting, yeah.
Was Barabbas a Jewish zealot?
Probably, people would say. A name like that, and this means that he was some kind of a religious zealot.
And they wanted to overthrow Rome forcefully.
Yeah, so one of the sub-narratives, if people really want to get into some of the subtext about what could be being said in this kind of narrative, is when an empire wants to fight against religious communities, it's going to breed zealots. And what you're going to get when you have empires fighting against religion is the uprising of other zealots. And you're going to get more of that. And who's going to be the victim of that? The one who's on God's side, Jesus. So Jesus becomes the victim, on the one who takes the effect of the battle between the zealots and the empire. And this is one of these big narratives that some people like to notice, and they say, this is why you want to tell that story over time, so that the Christian community doesn't find itself going down the route of militant zealots. Right? You breed more of those, they go free, and the war continues, and the innocents suffer. Jesus becomes the innocent in this case. So the crowd says, then what do you want us to do? And they said, release to us the one that you call the King of the Jews. And they hand him over to be crucified. Scene 4, where are we on? Scene 3, is everybody keeping track of the scenes? No? Is there a director here? No?
The soldiers led Jesus away into the courtyard of the palace known as the governor's headquarters, and they called together the whole company of soldiers. They dressed him up in a purple robe and twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on him. They saluted him, "Hey, King of the Jews." Again and again they struck his head with a stick. They spit on him and knelt before him to honor him. When they finished mocking him, they stripped him of the purple robe and put his own clothes back on him. Then they led him out to crucify him.
Scene 5.
Simon, a man from Cyrene, Alexander Rufus's father, was coming in from the countryside. They forced him to carry his cross. They brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means skull place. They tried to give him wine mixed with myrrh, but he didn't take it. They crucified him. They divided up his clothes, drawing lots for them to determine who would take what. It was 9 a.m. when they crucified him. The notice of the formal charge against him was written, "The King of the Jews." They crucified 2 outlaws with him, one on his right and one on his left.
It's one of those scenes where the Gospel of Mark gives us a specificity of names. So there's this guy named Simon, from Cyrene, you know. In fact, he's the dad of Alexander and Rufus. Really? Like that's the detail that the Gospel of Mark should carry on for all ages? Something's going on in these scenes where you're getting the names of these people. The names of Peter, but not the name of the woman. The name of Pontius Pilate. The name of Barabbas. The name of Simon. And even who his kids are. There's something going on. Maybe it's just an ancient storytelling mode. Maybe it's not, it's all of humanity that gets swept up in this stuff. Maybe it's telling the story in some first name basis way because it's easier for some people to find themselves in the story. I have some friends that I've mentioned to you before that are big into Catholic theology, and they like Catholicism because Catholicism keeps Jesus on the cross and the crucifix. I've been persuaded to this view. It's good to see a crucifix because when you see the crucifix, they remind me, you're not in an argument about was there a resurrection or not. You're pulled back into the story to say, we should remember that we all have the potential of being the people in this story, whether it's the crowds or the woman outside by the fire or Peter. That when we chase our own egos, when we chase our own empires, when we chase our own ways, when we chase the destruction of humanity, what we're going to end up doing is that. Not an empty cross but we're the kinds of people who would put Jesus on a cross. We put the Son of God. We put the one who's on God's side. We put the good guy on the cross. And we should always be reminded that when we gather together as a people, that we have the potential of being the ones who turn our backs on the righteous. And simultaneously, they say, you remind yourself that sometimes you are the one that is there. You've been the victim of other people's personal or systemic wrongdoings. And that you find solidarity with Jesus in that. So yeah, you want to tell the story of resurrection, but you don't want it to miss the implication of our own possibility of being engaged in it even this day. That's a pretty good argument. Maybe that's why you end up with these names like Barabbas and Pilate and Simon, the one who's complicit but not really in all of this, and the two that are hanging next to him. Reminds us that we might find ourselves in those situations, that we live in a world in which the oppressed, the innocent, the weak become the victims of the powerful. And that doesn't mean that God's on the side of the powerful, and it doesn't mean that God's not on the side of the weak, and it doesn't mean that God turns God's back on any of them. Pretty good story. You see why they keep these hanging around for a while. All right, that's where we're going to stop for tonight. Next week we're going to pick up with people insulting and all that, all the way through the resurrection. So the Gospel of Mark moves very fast. Crucifixion narrative even is, like in the Gospel of Mark, the whole thing about crucifixion that became that, whole Mel Gibson movie in the Gospel of Mark is summed up in, they crucified him. That's it. Something going on here where it just moves that narrative right through. Then there's some conversation. Anybody else with anything to note or comment or be called to in this?
It's interesting that Simon, the follower, or Peter, the follower of Christ, that followed him there, was the first in this. He lined up right with the established religion. He was the first, and then they continue to name names. And you're right, we can all be in that same boat.
There are some who like to point out Peter's name is Simon Peter. And now you have this other Simon, not the same one. This one was the dad of Rufus and Alexander. All right, anything else? The little ones aren't back yet, so we can keep going until they come back. We're on the kids' schedule. Maybe not. So we like to. That's all next week.
One little thing I read was that when Simon was asked or told to carry the cross, it wasn't the complete cross, that it was the cross beam that the crucified were expected to carry. So there was no balance on the ground, or there was no dragging. You had to carry it either on your shoulder or in your arms.
I remember you and I in Guatemala together carrying remember the big long beam we had to carry down that hill and up that hill? Yeah, forgotten about that. So you couldn't do that by yourself. One couldn't.
Well, after 39 lashes from the Roman whip, most people died.
Yeah. It's an intense story. Well, we sing a blessing. We finish on that note, and we sing a blessing to each other and for each other. So we all stand up and we sing a blessing to each other.
Why are you troubled? My hands and my feet. Your touch could be another way to see. Peace to your senses. The smell when you eat. The voice you hear when you aren't listening. So take it